Welcome to this demo of the Cardano transaction editor. I am Oscar, the author of this tool, which provides you with an editor-based approach to interact with the Cardano blockchain instead of the instruction-based approach offered by the Cardano CLI, the command line interface. In the description of this video, you will find a link to the GitHub repository where I have written an extensive documentation on how to install and use this tool. This demo will be a tour of the functionality rather than a tutorial. This is my minimalist editor and has been enhanced to interact with the Cardano network. Let's now mint some NFT. Launch the editor Cardano.el. I'll pick the recent UTXO I have with 100 data and use the first address as my change address. Since the merry era of Cardano, you can mint tokens. For that, you need a minting policy. The transaction editor provides you with a template to do that. If you type mint and tap, it will pre-fill a template for a minting an NFT. First need in your minting policy a key which will sign the minting. I will take for this second key. In general, minting policies are identified by their policy ID, which is something you have to calculate after you have defined the policy. Within the transaction editor, you can actually name your policy, and the editor will calculate afterwards what the policy ID is. In honor of the webcomics XKD, I will mint some tokens linking that. To ensure that tokens aren't minted unconstrainedly afterwards, your minting policy needs to have a clause that forbids minting after a specific slot. The editor proposes you to start with 1 hour ahead from the current slot and pre-fills this for you, but you can change this. I will mint 2 NFTs. The first will be called networking, quantity 1, and the second one will be called frustration, also with quantity 1. The transaction editor is not smart enough to figure out which is the key that is signing in the minting policy. As I pick here the second key, I need to say under witness, repeat second. Later versions of the editor, this might not be a required extra step, but for now you need to specify. If you were to require the minting policy to be signed by 2 keys, would use the Cardano address key hash and select another key to sign. You would add this to the witness case, the third. Also, because you specified in the minting policy a slot after which this policy is not valid, you need to specify in the transaction also that this transaction itself is not valid after that slot. With that, I am going to send the first token to the first address. I'm going to send about 2 million Lovelaces and XKCD token, then networking token 1. I'm going to copy this, pick now the second address, then again, not again, let's use 5 Lovelaces and send here the frustration. This would be the minting and distribution of the tokens. Now let's add some metadata to the NFTs. The transaction editor has a template for NFT metadata. You just write meta NFT, and it follows the Cardano Improvement Proposal 25 on the information you need to fill. My policy name is the XKCD policy. The token name, the first one, is networking token. There is some mirroring because it understands the name, the asset is also the name of token. The description is a string. Strings can be written directly or you can quote them. Both are fine. And I will put the IPFS direction of the image. When minting NFTs, this is an early thing. It's very new. I do not believe they represent intellectual property of any kind. I'm not really trading these NFTs. I'm actually only providing a link to the webcomic XKCD. Now, for the second token, I just copy frustration and do the same, rename this, copy the description and the IPFS address. Now, this is a rather big transaction. Let's review it again. I have one input that starts with my 100 ADA I did for my previous transaction. I am distributing three outputs. The first one sends to my first key 2 ADA and the networking token of the XKCD collection. The second one sends 5 ADA and the frustration token. I'm minting in the XKCD policy a script that requires 2 signatures from the key second and third, and it's valid only until this slot number. It means simultaneously 2 NFTs, the networking and the frustration. I assign the metadata under the identifier 721 for the XKCD policy that I just created, and I specify what they mean. Finally, I have to describe the witnesses that I have in my minting policy, and I need to specify the validity. That's all you need for minting and distributing tokens. And I find this is a rather comprehensible way of specifying the transaction. Now let's hit Ctrl+C, Ctrl+C to build and submit a transaction to the network. Everything clears. At the end, we have the message transaction successfully submitted, and we get the transaction ID. Now let's open Explorer, paste the transaction, and it's already happened. As you see, we spent one input, we minted 2 tokens, we distributed 1 token each to different addresses, and we sent the change to the third address. The script we used was a time lock script. We see the 2 minting addresses, their asset ID, their names, their policy ID, the quantity, and the metadata. Also within the Explorer, if I open the frustration token, I will find there being some warnings. The NFT image and the metadata I wrote. That's it. Hope you enjoyed the simplicity that the transaction editor provides you to create new transactions in the Cardano network. I invite you again to visit the GitHub repository and give it a try for yourself. There's extensive documentation on how to do everything. Key pairs, pending transaction, even sending to Bluetooth scripts, minting native tokens, and claiming out of Bluetooth scripts smart contracts. Bye.